Here is the question number 23. And here we can see it is just a part of the example we saw before. Okay? In that example, we have the information like this, but we did not find non-FP-SQR under FP, its CPI. We didn't find it. So this one, in this question, I just ask you to find it. Okay? Yeah. Its frequency we can easily find from given information. 23%. Okay. We use the same diagram. Okay. The partition like this we saw before. Okay. In this example, we still use PPE, processor performance equation. Okay. But here, we only need to look at three types of operations: FP, FP-SQR, and a non-FP-SQR under FP. We do not need to use non-FP operations. Okay. So when we write PPE equation, we only need to write the parts that we need to use here. Okay? Yeah. But here, before we write PPE equations, I would like to provide two different views to use the equation. Yeah. The first view, I call the global way. Okay. So what's the global way? Okay. So that is use all the operations as the consideration base. All right. So here we use all the operations, okay, as the consideration base. So that is when we use these frequency numbers, the base is the all operations. Okay? All right. But now let's write the PPE based on the original form. Okay? But when we write our current version of the PPE, we may need to change the format a little bit. So let's look at here. Okay. All right. CPI FP. Because here, so we will look at this part, we want to represent the CPI of FP, all right? But since its frequency is 25%, okay, it's not all the operations, okay? So FP operation only part of the all operations. So if here we use 1 as its coefficient, that means it corresponds to all the operations. So that's not correct. Okay? So the frequency for the CPI is, let me write, frequency of FP. Okay? Because its corresponding frequency is this. Okay? So then frequency of FPSQR and non-FPSQR under FP. Yeah. So here the special part is this. We use the frequency of FP. We do not use frequency of 1. Okay? So if you compare with original form, there is some small difference. But actually, from the meaning, so they are essentially the same. So why? Because the CPI here, that's the overall CPI. Overall, so that means we're talking about all the operations. Then it has also its corresponding frequency. So the frequency for the overall operation, that is 1. Okay? So there is a 1 frequency hidden, although you cannot see it, but you can, view in that way. Okay? But here, the frequency, because here we use the all operation as the consideration base, then the frequency of floating point, that is not 1. So that's 25%. Okay? So you should use that 25% here. Okay? Yeah. So that's the way you use the PPE. Okay? This is the first view. The second view, local way. Okay. Local way, we use some operation as the consideration base. Okay. That gives us the local meaning. Okay? Some operation. Okay? One particular operation. So here we like to use floating point operation as the consideration base. Okay? Yeah. So that means we just we do not look at other operations. Yeah. All right. Now, in this case, if we use PPE, CPI of FP. Okay. Yeah, because here the consideration base becomes floating point operation, then its corresponding frequency becomes 1. Okay. Because that's all the operations under consideration. Okay. So it becomes 1. Okay. Yeah, because we shrink the consideration base. Yeah. So the form will change. Okay. But when that consideration base changes, the frequency representation also need to change. Okay. The base changes. So now the new frequency for that FPSQR becomes this. Okay. Yeah, because with respect to floating point operations, now the current FPSQR frequency becomes this, not just 2%. Because if it's 2%, that means that's 2% of all operations. Okay? The base consideration is all operations. That's the global case. But now for the local case, we change the base consideration, so we should change the frequency representation. Okay. Similarly, the second one, that is 23% over 25%. Okay. All right. Okay. Now we get the second representation. Okay. So if you compare, so they're essentially equivalent. Yeah. I mean, just divide number both sides, multiply a number both sides. They have the equivalent, formula, equations. All right. But when we try to understand them, they have different views. Okay? You can choose either way. All right? Okay. That's for this question. Okay? So you can, complete the remaining part. Okay? Yeah. Before I finish this video, I have one important thing I want to talk about. So that is, yesterday some students asked me about how to write answers, how much detail do you want. So here I want to, talk about that to all students. Okay. All right. For multiple choice questions, you just select the answer. That's it. Okay. But for calculation questions, you need to provide some, details. To what extent you should provide the detail. So here I give you some guidelines. Okay. Yeah. All right. So some guidelines. Okay. First, you need to provide main steps. Okay? Yeah. Because some questions you may have several steps. Okay? So what are the main steps? Okay. Second, you may need to provide main formulas. Okay? Yeah. So what formulas do you use? Yeah, but sometimes they may be the same. Yeah, because the main formulas could reflect your main steps. So that's okay. Okay? Yeah. Yeah, but sometimes you may need to, write a few sentences to explain your ideas. Yeah. Okay. 3. Skip computation details. Okay? Yeah. So after you have the questions, how do you calculate and get your answer? Yeah, because that part, I think, just the part you can do on scratch papers. So you do not need to put it here. Okay? Yeah. So you can skip that part. Okay? Yeah. Last step, answer. Okay, so you need to give the final answer. Okay, all right. So basically, you do in that way. Okay, yeah. But one student asked me, how about you just give a final answer? Okay, yeah. But because if you want to do that, there is a risk. The risk is if your answer is wrong, then you will lose all the points. Okay? Yeah, so that's the risk. Yeah, yeah. Because for example, for our homework questions, each question worth 4 points. Okay, 4 points. Yeah. If you only provide the final answer, you may lose partial credit you can get if you provide, other information. Okay? Yeah. For example, typically, if you provide you know, main steps 1, 2, but you missed the last answer. So, you know, your calculation could be wrong, okay? A little bit. In that case, usually for the wrong answer, I only take 1 point off, okay? -1, okay? You can still earn partial credit for the first 2 steps. That's the 3 points, okay? So, from the 4 points, you can still earn 3 points, only lose 1 point, okay? If you skip number 1, number 2, and you miss the final answer, you lose all the 4 points. Okay? So that is the risk. Okay? Yeah. So take that into consideration, you know, try to get as many points as you can. Okay? All right. So that's about the homework. Okay. Here is the